We are all used to the bright glossy box art from Games Workshop, but sometimes when you buy something from deep in the bowels of Games Workshop, you get a box like this. A nondescript white cardboard box with 3 logos on it, so it can be used for any product line. Inside this box are some of the oldest plastic sprues Games Workshop still sells. Horrors long forgotten from a bygone age. And I am going to fix them. Ah, the humble Catachan guardsman, hailing from a death world which is so dangerous even the plants that live there are deadly predators. The Catachan are buff, sweaty jungle fighters famous for their combat knives and their aversion to wearing their armor. My favorite thing about the Catachan is the hero Sly Marbo, who is at the same time a parody of Sylvester Stallone's Rambo while being sculpted to look more like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's also holding the gun Kurt Russell used in Escape from New York just to add another touch of weirdness and awesomeness. The Catachan are one of 2 Imperial Guard regiments still supported by Games Workshop, but I have a theory as to why that is. Games Workshop really struck gold with the Space Marines, as the 40k hobby is all about making things your own and finding your niche, and Space Marines can be changed dramatically with just a simple color swap. It has been this way since the beginning. Different chapters of Marines who are all basically physically identical, but their colors determine their chapter, history, ideology, creed, and rituals. It makes sense. Space Marines already have the best of the best of the best gear, so they don't really need to customize or alter their kit. It's the perfect way to have one model range service a huge swath of gamers. Now compare that well-oiled machine to the Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, who have just as many regiments as the Space Marines have chapters, but they are all drastically different from one another. They have the Cadian Shock Troops, the Starship Troopers movie ripoffs, the Catachan Jungle Fighters, sweaty action heroes in the jungle, the Talern Desert Raiders with their desert camo and head wraps, the Valhallan Ice Warriors who wear cold weather gear and Ushanka hats, the Mordian Iron Guard who wear their dress blues into the thick of combat, the Armageddon Steel Legion with their khaki fatigues and gas masks, the Death Corps of Krieg with their drab blue trench coats and blasé attitude towards death, the Praetorian Guard with their pith helmets and red coats and I'm better than you mustaches, the Vostroyan Firstborn with their dapper red coats and silly bearskin hats, the Elysian Drop Troops, the other Starship Troopers ripoff, the Tanith First and Only, ghillie suit snipers with camo cloaks, the Maccabean Janissaries with their grim gothic cloaks and spooky silver masks, and on, you get the point. Games Workshop tried to keep up with this for a while. It was easier when there was only 2 vehicles in the Guard range. Just make some different trooper boxes and heavy weapon team or 2, and you're good to go, but nowadays, there's almost 50 unique units in the Guard Codex, so Games Workshop culled the range. So now it has become the Cadian Show, guest starring the Catachans. And maybe that's for the best. Games Workshop offers all the vehicles and equipment you need, while other makers like Anvil Industries, Victoria Miniatures, and about 1 million STL makers have picked up the slack for the other regiments. But Games Workshop has kept the Catachan around. Out of all the regiments, they decided the Jungle Boys were worthy of staying. They even had their own book for a while. I don't know if I see it personally. The Catachan are cool, but so are a lot of the Imperial Guard regiments. But I do have a box of them, so let's crack in and see what's what. The plastic kit is old, to say the least, and it has all the shortcomings of kits from this time period. All the lasguns come with hand grips and stocks that you have to carefully cut off and then glue on the hands, which is surprisingly a tricky task to pull off. The models are the classic leg, torso, 2 arms, and a loose gun and head, and that is perfectly modular, but also a pain in the butt, and everything kinda looks bad. This modularity comes at a cost. I hear a lot of moaning about the newer kits, but at least those look great and go together easily. The best I can say for these plastic boys is they are truly my own creation. The metal models, on the other hand, look a lot better. Sort of. They are all 1-part metal models, and you can see the benefits of the Mini being one artist's vision. More dynamic poses, better proportions, but they are also a product of the time, and sculpting has come a long way since these models hit the scene. I'm conflicted. These models just don't do it for me. There is a battle going on in my head because I really like old stuff. It makes me smile, but it's because of the oldness and jankness. Newer models, when I see them, I'm often like, that is so cool and I want to own it and paint it. Where these old kits are more like, that's hilarious, I want to own it and paint it. But I want to see, can I save a Mini with painting? Is that even a thing? Can painting save a bad model or fix problems in the sculpt? Or is a bad Mini doomed to mediocrity? Find out on this episode of Jay Paints a Thing. If the Catachan are known for one thing, that one thing would be fighting in the tundra, so I'm gonna be doing some classic snowy bases. I'm just kidding, I'm gonna do jungle. I want to give my minis a little earth to stand on, so I took some cork and marked out the size of the base. Then I tore off a little cork puck following my pen line so that it would fit perfectly. Then I stuck the cork down with lots of super glue. Cork is porous, so you'll need way more glue than you think to keep it stuck down. With my metal model, I filed the tabs into little pins and stabbed it into the cork. Super easy and effective. On the plastic guy, I tried gluing him down with super glue, but the bond was just too small, so I ended up having to pin him with a paperclip. Then I did some last minute cleaning of the models. They both had some pretty nasty mold lines, so I cleaned them up as best I could. Then it was time for some decoration. I used these 3D printed leaves from Epic Basing and stuck them down to my bases. These are great because they are cartoony just like the models, so my silly Catachan won't be standing next to hyper-realistic plants. That would make them look even derpier. The models and bits share an aesthetic, so it'll look seamless together. Then I threw on a layer of wood glue, then sprinkled some fine-grained sand over it to hide the cork top. After that, I primed the models black with my favorite airbrush primer, Stynal Res Black, and then zenithal from above with some white primer. You can do this with white inks, but I don't want to wait for them to cure, and white primer is pretty robust. A zenithal prime is always so attractive. I always worry that I'm gonna screw it up with my paint job. And speaking of my paint job, I don't want to do a classic base coat wash highlight, because that's how Games Workshop painted theirs, and I don't want mine to look like how Games Workshop's look. So I think I'm gonna try to make use of the airbrush, contrast, and glazing to get these guys looking nice. I started with the bases, as these are the hardest to reach after the model is done. I sprayed brown all over the cork. Then I put a green into my airbrush and sprayed the leaves and plants. This is a nice first step, 2 things already finished. And a little bit spilled onto the model, but it won't matter as I'm gonna paint over them. And speaking of painting over them, I took some contrast camo green and threw this onto the pants. Contrast is perfectly complemented with a zenithal, as you get your contrast and value all in one. I continued this contrast trend with some Plague Bearer's flesh on the shirt. This with the bright white turned into a lovely yellow-green, and then I put some snakebite leather over, you guessed it, the leather parts. Putting this contrast on the boots didn't get much zenithal, so they look very dark. The belt got a medium hit with the white, so it looks a little bit more of a mid-brown. And on the bright white pouches on his shoulders, the contrast looks very light brown, almost orange. 3 different colors, all with the same brown. It's always great to get the most out of your equipment. And you know what else you can really get the most out of? That's right, our Patreon. Over there we have lots of high quality terrain STLs available, and it is the best way to support us making videos. In addition to great grimdark terrain, you'll also gain access to 1 exclusive video a week, some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live here on YouTube, a live hobby hangout every week, and more. Another great way to support us is checking out our merch. You can follow the link in the description below to our shirts and sweatshirts with some fun hobby related designs. Now that said, let's work on the skin. Next I mixed up a skin tone, mixing brown into some red beige. I watered this down a ton and mixed it with some paint medium to help it flow. The wateriness of the paint meant that my zenithal is showing through, and I applied multiple layers until I had built up a pure color on the highest parts of the mini. Then I broke out the airbrush, and using my superfine needle and nozzle, I sprayed on the original red beige. This brought my skin tone up and kept a nice blend going. I also used this on the faces, spraying from above and masking the model with my fingers. What I'm trying to do is introduce some subtlety into the models. The way Games Workshop painted them, they have lots of contrast, but it's way too much and in all the wrong places. Look at those muscles, they are basically outlined in red. That's not how you paint skin. I want to highlight the details, but not literally outline them. And taking advantage of a zenithal is the way to do that. Everything will have the appropriate value based on light. So the colors will look dynamic and not so flat and cartoony. The models are already cartoony, I don't need to push the silliness even further. You can totally do this airbrushing step with a brush, but I have an airbrush, so I wanted to use it to save myself a bunch of time. Next, some washes. I used Reikland Flesh Shade, but I am not just slobbering it on. That would make the skin look red and bruised. Instead, I am using mostly wash medium and just a tiny bit of the red wash, going over some areas a few times to get the recesses in between the muscles just right. After the wash, I went back in with my brush to fix any overpowering the wash did and clean up the face and make the details more prominent. Last step for the skin, I mixed a little white paint and used this as a final little pop of value to the skin. Lots of steps, but each one is easy, and it leads to skin that looks a lot like skin and not this. I used the brown that was already on my palette to make a quick wash for the model's hair, mixing with black for the grenade launcher specialist and red beige for the lasgunner. Next up, I introduced a new color, red. All Catachan wear red bandanas, and this one instance of bright red will make for a very striking detail that'll bring emphasis to the face of the model. These guys are coming along nicely, and the next step is going to be their weapons. Now the question is, true metallic metals or non-metallic metals? Non-metallic metals usually look better, but they take way longer, so I'm gonna be lazy and stick with true metallic metals, but I have some ideas of how to spice them up. I put some silver onto my palette and watered this down a little. It mostly hid my zenithal, but it was still peeking through just a little bit. Then I gave these silver arrows a wash with Nuln Oil. This will help show off the details, but after a thick washing, the weapons were looking too dark, so I broke up my small dry brush and some bright silver and brought the shininess right back up. Now my weapons look good, but I want them to really pop, so I took some blue ink, put this into my airbrush, and carefully sprayed this onto the weapons. This will give them a cold feeling that doesn't exist anywhere else on the model. Is it realistic that Catachan keep their weapons so clean and shiny that they have a blue chromey look? Probably not, but I think it makes for a big visual impact, and that really matters a lot more to me than realism. After all, this is 40K, not some dumb historical. I took the colors left on my palette and made a dark brown wash, and put this over the base. Then I took the same brown that I've been using for the whole paint job and used this for the rim of the base. I think I'm done. And that's always the question, isn't it? When is a model truly done? For me, it depends on what kind of a mood I'm in. If I was feeling like more of a perfectionist, I could throw a bunch of greens onto my palette and tidy up the pants. The contrast brown did a pretty good job at the pouches and straps, but I could do better. I could even break out some micro brushes and paint their eyes, but you know what? I don't feel like I need to. I'm satisfied. I've been painting for about 4 hours, and I'm happy with the minis. I'd be content to plonk these down on the gaming table, and I had fun painting them. And you know what? That's really what matters. I didn't really plan to fall in love with these minis, that's why I didn't paint the entire squad. I thought I would try to fix them while memeing on Games Workshop a bunch for selling such old, dumb-looking models. In Games Workshop, you have to update the Catachan. They are borderline unacceptable. Every day these old kits are still on the web store, the situation gets more ridiculous. But I'm kinda digging on them now. After painting these two, I see the possibility in a fun-looking retro throwback force, and it didn't take too much time or paint. I didn't use nearly as many colors as I usually do. Taking advantage of washes and contrast, I think I'll paint up a kill team of them and bring these silly plastic models from 1999 into the tabletop in 2022. And I don't think we've heard the last of the Jungle Fighters, as someone from Games Workshop still seems to love them. Games Workshop from time to time comes out with promotional minis, limited release models, mostly in the form of Primaris Lieutenants, and a smattering of other models. And as most factions get 1 or more, usually 0 unique models, the Catachan, an army of Rambos in the jungle, have gotten 3. So I won't be counting them out just yet, but in terms of a timeline, I am not holding my breath on new plastics. What do you guys think? Was I able to fix these models, or am I polishing a turd? I think I'll continue to paint them, maybe even keep my eyes open on eBay to pick up some more metals.